Hello, respected viewers. I'm George from Ireland. So this video is telling you reasons to be cheerful about coronavirus. Yes, it may seem counterintuitive. Perhaps I'm being contramundum because other people are wailing about it, but there's no point in just sending out plangent messages. There are some good things about it, and yes, I know it's poignant because some people have passed away. They've been called to their reward. The Marquis of Bath, whom I once saw address the Oxford Union Society, he has died at the age of 87 due to this malady. A chap who's studied eccentricity won him plaudits, who used to dress in a caftan and was a smoking jacket. This peer of the realm who had a bland and conventional upbringing, but turned out to be a very colourful and different character. Look up the Marquis of Bath. I don't want to be detained talking about him. And maybe some other famous people who've died, possibly even Boris Johnson. I think he should resign as First Lord of the Treasury. He's clearly incapable of discharging his functions. I know he's got Dominic Raab to deputise for him, but he should step down at least temporarily. But back to what's good about coronavirus. We know what's bad, so I'm not going to bang on about that. You can see a plethora of other videos lamenting coronavirus, but I often like to quote Sir Ivan Novello correctly, there's a silver lining through the dark cloud shining. So what are the good things about it? Traffic has decreased. You don't have to feel guilty about having a drink or whatever. Eat some junk food. If we're all going to go to die anyway, enjoy ourselves on the way. We go to hell in the handcart, so I wouldn't be too worried about heavy drinking, unhealthy eating, unsafe sex, trying drugs. I've never tried cocaine, but I'm wondering whether I'll give it a shot, because if we're doomed, I want to see what it's like. Fewer planes flying over, not waking me up early in the morning. Cycling is a great deal easier. It's like Sunday morning permanently. There's so little traffic on the road. Air quality has improved remarkably. The Chinese are tasting decent air quality for the first time in nigh on 3 decades. You see documentaries of the early 90s, everyone's cycling around, even Beijing. But then China started to manufacture automobiles at home, and because the automotive industry really took off, the Chinese government switched its policy on its head and encouraged car ownership. So people are happier because of their newfound prosperity, but it's also boosting their economy. They're not spending hard currency purchasing foreign vehicles. Virgin Atlantic might go bust, so wipe that smirk off the smarmy face of Sir Richard Branson. So Branson's in a pickle, if you forgive the pun. I know it's Branston pickle, it's not his family, but that's by the by. Ryanair may be nosediving, so thanks a lot. Who's Michael O'Leary, who owns it? He said the European consumer would crawl naked over broken glass for cheap airfares, which describes Ryanair's boarding procedure with uncanny accuracy. So he goes, oh my God, they would charge you this and that, and then 17.5%. So world population's being put out of its misery. We, Homo sapiens, have done so much to wreck the planet, and soon we shall be mulched into the soil. We're corrupting in the fertility around us, and finally replenishing the earth that we plundered for so long with some decent nutrients. But for the time being, he got more family time. Okay, sorry, that's a downside. Joke. Depends what your family is. I'm an anti-family values person, by the way. More time for DIY if you're into your quincaillerie. Gardening. What else? Give your house a thorough spring cleaning. You're going to be there dirtying it all the time, so you ought to be there. You might find that you can find that there is contentment without shopping. So rampant consumerism may have to take a break. That's been furloughed. People often had to tighten their belts. And so as we had to introduce austerity measures, we get back to what really makes us cheerful. And no, it's not just live, buy, consume, die. It's not just endlessly acquiring trinkets, whatever, just status symbols. I don't want to just pile up possessions. I want experiences. Unfortunately, I can't have such cheery experiences. More time to mess around on the internet and watch furfies such as I'm spouting right now. It may ruin dictatorships, so it's, they're going to be really hammered. The Gulf states, Russia, the United States. Okay, joke. The United States is not a dictatorship. Russia is an inch away from a dictatorship. They at least have some sort of charade of democracy. So let's be fair. And there'd be no harm in tightening the restrictions on North Korea even more, because we don't really need their coal, as is an energy glut. It's an all-time low. I thought what people could do with regard to the Russian Federation is just say, we're not going to buy your energy at all. And they'd be screwed because it's so much their economy. I'm not Russophobic at all. I have lots of Russian friends. I've had Russian girlfriends. I really like Russia. I want to be a happier, freer, safer country. But I do think Russia ought to end its illegal occupation of Crimea, the Donbass, Luhansk, Abkhazia, South Ossetia, and Transnistria. How about that? Illegally occupying the land of 3 of its neighbors, and not even admitting that it's illegally occupying them, lying about them, even when it invades Ukraine, saying that they're not our soldiers. They say the Americans invaded places. Well, they did. Now, pursuant to UN resolutions, it's arguable that's legal. But the United States said, yeah, we invaded it. They told the truth, unlike the Kremlin. So no more wars of aggression. I've not got it. So you be happy you're not dead yet. You might be in reasonable health like me. So that is another thing to celebrate. Yeah. So oil price is very low. We can spend more money on other things. Some people have got a steady income. More time for lessons with me, homeschooling. And we won't feel this is the way forward, that working from home works so well, we'll just do it permanently. Cut out on the commute, fewer carbon emissions. So that's that. I might take out the Trumpists, because Trump, if I didn't know better, I thought, is he trying to spread it throughout his country as much as possible, disseminating this absolute twaddle that it was about to disappear, vanished like a miracle, that people should go to church at Easter? I mean, as though he's trying to do as much harm as possible in as few words as he could. My God, if he wanted to urge people to go and contract the disease, he could scarcely have done better. If someone was asked to dream up a way to encourage Americans to pass on the disease and to catch the disease, they probably would have come up with something about that, like that. Yeah, go to church at Easter, good one. Staying there for an hour in close proximity to people, singing lustily these hymns to the resurrection of Jesus. Well, most Americans are not Jesus, nor are they Lazarus. They're not going to come back from the dead. Most people only die once. So this is a natural cataclysm of extraordinary magnitude, almost unexampled in a century in terms of a disease. Well, it is. Wars are different, but this is a natural calamity. But its effects have been severely aggravated by certain actions and inactions of certain governments, and the United Kingdom has done quite badly, but worse than average for a highly developed country. Now, how about all these wingnuts, these Christian fundamentalists who Bible trumpers? Would they not regard this as a divine judgment? They would probably presume it to be an act of God, think that providence has rained down this on us. Is it a heavy trial, or is it divine retribution for our wickedry? Because Trump seems to be a leading exponent of the providentialist perspective, claiming that it didn't rain, lie, during his inauguration because God said whatever, as though Trump could read the mind of the Almighty, if indeed the Almighty exists, which I don't believe myself. So is it an act of this all-wise, all-merciful, omniscient Lord? Surely that's what a Christian fundamentalist would have to believe. And probably they would think that it's divine judgment on deep and inveterate social evil. The roots of that would be something like, the gay liberation movement, or extramarital sex, or I'm not quite sure what, abortion. Although I'm with him on that one. Abortion is horrid. So anyway, this thing you could declare is God taking people out. But why doesn't he aim it at the iniquitous? Why is he getting everyone? I remember in Wuthering Heights, there's that character, James, whoever says, so he prayed to the Lord to remember how in former times he spared the righteous and he smote the ungodly. But why does God smite the innocent so very much? It doesn't add up. It's like Samuel Pepys saying this about the bubonic plague when it struck Lundenwic in the 1660s, that some of the godly, they offered up their hasty orisons in a steeple house, but you might think that the angel of death would pass over them. But no, he struck them as often as he struck the sinful. So this could be a sharp but effectual remedy if you were a providentialist for taking out the bad uns, but it's not. It's taking out the good uns. Are going to take them out rather more if they keep packing their prayer houses. So Trump assures us a cure is likely to be effected in short order, but I don't repose any faith in that. There's no, he didn't cite any scientific evidence for saying that. I know people are working on these things night and day, but that doesn't guarantee it'll come around. I would desperately want it to come around. You know, there are elderly people I'm very fond of. I don't want them to go to meet their maker. I know we're all going to go to the grave, but I do not want to see the limp carcass of a loved one lowered into the cold clay. I do not want to see this person chewed by worms. I know it's going to happen, but we'd like to delay it. So God grant that this generation will come to see the light of the Enlightenment and be a bit more rational in future. We got to heed these warnings. So often we've been told, you know, we've got a social distance, and I've succumbed to temptation sometimes and not been far enough away from people. So, but this is also a great opportunity to set our house in order and to clean up the planet, and the United States to have publicly funded healthcare, because privately funded healthcare is killing people. How much for a coronavirus test in the United States? Roughly $4,000. Okay, a lot of people can't afford that. Most Americans don't have a $500 for an emergency. What are you going to do? Nothing get more urgent than this. And then once you got it, there are more and more and more things that your insurance may not cover or copay. So it's just ruinous. So this person can't afford to get a test, going around passing on to many other people. So it doesn't just affect the individual, it affects the whole of society, which costs them too. So it's just a no-brainer that this ought to be publicly funded just to save others. Why does the United States government have a Department of Health then, if it's not a federal government responsibility? Because as Trump has declared a state of emergency, a national state of emergency, to wit, it is federal responsibility. Otherwise, he wouldn't have declared the federal emergency. Why does the CDC exist? And there's a federal agency to deal with such situations. Anyway, he's done nothing to restrain mass mingling in many states. He hasn't led by example. He could have set an example by social distancing himself at these press conferences. He didn't need to do in-person press conferences. He can do online press conferences. But, you know, so even if these people have all been COVID-19 tested, I don't know that they have, people will see that and assume, oh, right, so we can be cheek by jowl with people, and that's a responsible thing to do. Because many people will foolishly assume that because they're seeing their head of state doing it, it's an acceptable thing to do, that it's sensible, that it's backed by some sort of medical evidence. Anyway, it's hypothesized that the warm weather reduces it, and certainly in the sunnier climes, there seems to be less transmission and much lower incidence in countries such as Indonesia, Vietnam, Thailand, India. In India, it's not even a drop in the ocean. It's just a microscopically small proportion of the populace of that immense subcontinent of 1.4 billion people have contracted this dreadful malady. So we need a permanent remedy to the situation. It'd be great if we had a vaccine. What's needed to be corrected is this completely laissez-faire attitude to healthcare in some countries, particularly the United States. So a more public-spirited and compassionate attitude would be the best solution. You know, might know that I'm a capitalist bastard and all the rest of it, but yeah, I certainly favour publicly funded healthcare because it's good for everyone, and that includes your humble servant. You can see I always dress up for these things. So, but anyway, maybe it's going to wipe out tens of millions of people, but that would be surely a highly effectual mechanism for reducing the surplus population. In the United States, it's going to rid the United States of a lot of good people, but a few arseholes as well, some Trumpists in the Bible Belt. I'm not against everyone in the Bible Belt, but I mean, Trumpists, well, they're either just very, very dim or just very, very malevolent to support an absolute scumbag. And what has he succeeded on? What's he actually delivered on? He's moved the embassy in Israel, and the economy was going quite well in the beginning. And I think that's it. I can't really think of anything else he's done. He's not withdrawn from Iraq. He's not withdrawn from Afghanistan. He's not withdrawn from Syria. He didn't defeat ISIS. He's not going to build the wall. Doesn't even say there's going to be a wall. Says there's going to be a fence. Mexico's not going to pay a peso for it, and on and on and on. He's defunded Medicare. He's defunded Medicaid. He's not made medicines cheaper. He's not made medicines better. And is lied well over 10,000 times on the record. So is this a judgment of God? I don't think so. But how moronic could it be, the governor of Florida saying, well, I'm not going to close churches. Well, you've got the authority to ban any public meeting, and that includes religious ones. Do you think people worshipping are somehow immune from catching it when they're in their place of worship? I mean, how stupid can you be? No, I wouldn't ban religious activities. You can do them in groups of one or two, or you can do them in your family group at home, but you can't do them in groups of hundreds of people. That's the whole point. Yeah, and it's not the religious activity as such, it's the gathering. You can say the prayers, you can carry out, do your patty cakes or whatever your actions are, or with the bread and the wine. You can swing your incense, you can ring your bells, you can kneel down, you can adore the icon and kiss it, or elevate the host or something, or read out the Bible, but you just can't do it in huge groups. So why does it have to be a minimum of 100? Would 20? Is that enough? Anyway, so further than this, it's a real evil that we have to contend with is this malevolent disregard of science. And it is malevolent because it's going to kill a lot of people. Oh well, it doesn't matter. Experts don't matter, and this is where anti-intellectualism can take us. I know that in the humanities there are many airy-fairy intellectuals, and they write just academic drivel, just this impenetrable prose. Academic prose is sort of rated highly for its opacity, when it's just incomprehensible and just broken up into so many subordinate clauses with too much punctuation. That actually that wins lots of plaudits. So I don't like that kind of stuff. But hard science is something provable. Yeah, and people are rejecting objective data. Well, I don't like it, therefore it doesn't exist, therefore it doesn't count. The same on climate change, the same attitude pertains. That's the whole thing about science. It's provable one way or the other. Sometimes you can't prove it with absolute certainty. You can just get very, very close to that, particularly as with climate change. So shouldn't we go with what's more probable? And say, well, it's far more probable that climate change is happening than not. It's far more probable that it's at least partly anthropogenic, and it's far more probable than not that it's harming us, and so forth. And the same spirit of inquiry ought to apply to coronavirus. You can see the trajectory in many other countries, but the United States, because it's the states are like herding cats. They're doing different things. Some of them are quite sensible, like New York. Then it's gonna spread. So coronavirus does not respect county lines or state lines or national borders. Some Florida counties closing beaches, others not, and people can cross from one county to another very freely. They can cross from one state to another. And now I've just discovered that states in the US have the right to block people from traveling from one state to another. But in practice, how effective is that going to be? Are you going to have a roadblock on every single road from one state into the next? And are you going to man that 24/7? People could even drive off the road. They could drive a motorbike. They could cycle. They could walk. They could go by a kayak or something. So you can't completely stop them. I know no border is absolutely sealed, largely sealed, but this is a very, very difficult law to enforce. Anyway, so there is this moral evil of this selfish, perverse, and turbulent president whose character is just singularly unsuited to handling a crisis like this. It is of the first importance that there is some sort of coherent and sensible policy, getting the military involved with its logistic capacity, with its obviously with its medical services to assist civilians and to distribute aid on the basis of need. The federal government bought all the ventilators and gave them out to the states on the basis of need, and was even reimbursed at cost price by the states. That would be sensible. We could think about paying for it later, and that would deal with the problem quickly. And then we could be out of that, and the economy could be growing, because it's sort of a stitch in time saves nine. And if you dither and do things by half measures, then the restrictions are going to have to go on for far, far longer, because South Korea, Singapore, Taiwan are already lifting out of it, and Iceland likewise, because if you're fast into lockdown, you can be fast out of it and trace people and test people and isolate those who need to be isolated and let the others get back to normal, and the economy will start growing again. So some people are strained to the utmost to believe that this is actually going to impact then. Well, believe it. It's killed how many tens of thousands of people around the globe? This is not a joke. All right. So you can alleviate this great calamity, as I said, by following logical policies which are based on medical evidence. And Trump could have done so much to avert this danger by locking down much earlier, and by giving wise advice, and by leading an example. But even when he said to that people shouldn't have huge gatherings, he's not practiced what he's preached. Okay, they're not huge gatherings, but certainly gatherings of dozens of people. He could have done everything in his power to avert this. It wouldn't be difficult to get right, just to listen to the experts, more or less singing with one voice on the right steps to take. Plus, you look for best practice around the world, and then you emulate success analyze both success and failure, as you should do in anything, and you see where it's gone very badly, and you avoid that. France, Spain, Italy, even with stringent measures, took a month for it to peak. And if we're lucky, it already has peaked, we're plateaued, and it's coming down just slowly. But it would be at least 2 months to the return to a semblance of normality. In some of the least affected districts, they might be able to loosen some of the restrictions in short order. So there is a defective part of the national character in America, not talking about every American, but a large minority, that set their face against scientific evidence when it comes to evolution and climate change, or let's say guns. I know it's not exactly scientific, but data about murder rates and guns and how it can be brought down. I know there are countries with higher rates, murder rates, where there are quite restrictive gun laws, various lawless Central American countries. But if you're going to compare the United States to a fairly similar, prosperous Western democracy, you'd see what I'm talking about. So anyway, Trump ought to be severely chastised for this criminal negligence, for just letting it rip. But unfortunately, I've come to expect this kind of thing from his government. Really doesn't fix anything. So he's saying that we should not have big gatherings. Well, physician, heal thyself, as he claims to know so much about the good book, he might know where that quotation comes from. And now he acts as though he himself had no part to perform in this great crisis, where he very much did. He is the president. He could have used the military. He could have at least used his influence, knocked heads together. I'm not sure how extensive his authority is over the states in these situations. Treat it as a war situation, which is what he's likened it to, and have some sort of a plan to implement instead of contradicting himself and wringing his hands, dithering, and just not following the expert advice. So it's despicable, it's pitiful, and so much of this grief was avoidable. Anyway, that's enough of a tirade from me. So please follow me on Instagram, on Twitter, on Facebook, and subscribe. You want to book online lessons with me in history, geography, politics, religious studies, French and law, and choose me as your tour guide in London Wick when this reopens to tourism in about a millennium's time. Toodaloo.